Good morning. My name is Rick Jacobs, and I'm here with Brian Snyder, our pastor, to talk a little bit about sabbatical and what's coming up for us. This is new territory for Bower Hill. We've never had a pastor on sabbatical since I've been in the 25 years I've been here, and longer than that. And it's also new for you. You've not ever been on sabbatical before. So in thinking about that, it raises some questions that I had in my mind, and I think, well, if I have questions, I suspect the congregation does as well. And so I thought maybe we could spend a few minutes today talking about sabbatical and what it means for Brian and what it means for the church, and basically what is a sabbatical. So that's a good place to start. Brian, what is a sabbatical?
What is a sabbatical? That's a good question. I think we're used to hearing about sabbaticals in the academic world. For the last 20 years or so, churches, denominations especially, have begun to recognize the need for sabbaticals for pastors. Pastors actually, a lot of people don't know this, it's a high burnout job. It's a job, and I don't feel personally like I'm anywhere near burnout. But it is a job that takes constant recharging and rethinking and refocusing as you lead, let's admit it, a relatively unfashionable institution into the future. So it's supposed to be, it's not time off and it's not vacation. It's supposed to be a time when you step back from the daily tasks of ministry to think about the big picture, what you want to do with your congregation, what the congregation might be called to next. It's a time to get new perspective, new vision, new energy, and to be spiritually recharged. It's based on the idea of Sabbath. You know, in the Hebrew scriptures, there was Sabbath every week, but then there was Sabbath every 50 years. And so the presbytery, Pittsburgh Presbytery, like most presbyteries now, is recommending every 7 years a pastor needs to step back and reconsider how they're doing ministry and think about where God might be calling the congregation to go next. And so I think it's an exciting opportunity. You know, I've been here almost 12 years now, and it was 12 years ago that you led the interview that brought me here, or that opened the door for my coming here. And I feel like in some ways, I'm still the pastor you had 12 years ago. And
That's a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. But the world has changed in 12 years, especially post-pandemic, and I need some new input. I feel good about the life of our church. I think we've got great energy at this church. I'm excited about the future, but I need some new ideas. And that's what the sabbatical is intended to do.
Okay, what about presbytery? What's their position on sabbaticals, and do you get any support from them?
Presbytery does not require sabbaticals, but it does recommend sabbaticals at least every 7 years. And they've got a rationale for that. I've got it right here. They say it's an opportunity for the individual to strategically disengage from the regular normal tasks of ministry so that they can be viewed from a new perspective. And the rationale is that it brings to pastors new energy, spiritual vision, and effectiveness. So I think presbytery is concerned about longevity in congregations. The average tenure for a pastor in a congregation these days is 3 years. That's not good. It's not good for the church because what can you do in 3 years? You can make a mess of things in 3 years, and you can do some good stuff in 3 years, but in 6 years, the pastor doesn't remember what you decided, previously. And so it's healthy for churches to have relatively longer tenures of their pastors. And so Presbytery is interested in keeping pastors in churches for more than 3 years. And they feel that 7-year itch is a real thing, as they say. A lot of pastors look around after 7 years and say, well, I've done what I can do here. I don't want that to be the case with us. I want to be here for the long term. And so I think Presbytery is wise in recommending sabbaticals for clergy, because it helps them to refocus. It helps them to get the new insights and the new energy that they need.
Brian, I understand that the sabbatical is going to be several months in duration, and I guess I would be interested in having you tell me why so long, and how you decided on the amount of time.
I actually chose the shortest period of time that's recommended. They recommend 4 to 6 months, but I didn't feel like I could be away for more than 3. And I did try to pick the 3 least busy months of the church year, so that balls would not be dropped in my absence. The program life of the year kind of slows down in the summer. So it will be June, July, and August, and there are no classes. A lot of people vacation at that time. So the projects that I have going are mostly 2 weeks at a time, and we can talk about those. I'm sure you have some questions about those coming up. But 3 months seemed like a sufficient amount of time for me to disengage, not to disengage from ministry, but to disengage from the daily tasks of ministry, and to focus on big picture issues. But like I say, 3 months is pretty much the minimum for a sabbatical.
So what is it that you plan to do on your sabbatical?
I have a stack of books that I need to read that have come out since the pandemic. It's amazing how quickly thinkers in the church have responded to what is the church going to be post-pandemic? How do we need to think about ministry post-pandemic? So I've got a stack of these that I need to read and process. I've got some writing I'd like to do, some big picture writing. I've had parishioners from this and other churches for years saying, you ought to put some of your books into a collection so that people can have those. And at first that sounded so very egotistical to me that I would publish my own sermons, that I was very resistant. But I've had enough people ask now that I'm asking people, if you've got a favorite sermon, let me know, and I might curate it into the publication. I've got a potential publisher, and so I would like to collect 52 sermons, maybe a year's worth, and put them in a collection. That is low-hanging fruit. I've also got some thinking to do about what psychologists call integration. That's to say, I have a whole other life across the ocean that I talk about sometimes, but that is so very divorced from the life I live now. And I would like to do some integration of those two lives. By some act of providence, I am now on the board of a ministry for Cameroonian children who are orphaned by the civil conflict in that country. I lived there for 5 years. And I have a family over there, essentially, that I've never met. I took in a street child, and he is now married with 4 kids of his own. He named his oldest son after me. I don't know these people. I don't know his wife. I don't know his children. I talk to them sometimes by Skype, but I need to go back to Cameroon, and I want my family to know Cameroon, and I want them to know Francois and his family, and I want to meet them and know them. So that's a 2-week project. The Yonkers have graciously offered me their vacation home, their summer home not their summer home, their winter home in Colorado for my writing project to get away and do that. And that'll be for about a month for the writing projects. And so I guess I'm jumping ahead of myself. I've got the writing project, which will include a publication of sermons, which will include possibly the beginnings of planning writing about the Africa years, which I talk about a lot, but also going back to Africa. So those are two separate things: writing, traveling, and then, as you know, what inspires me and where I commune with God, I like to think is very much where Jesus communed with God, in the wilderness. And we know Jesus very often did retreat to the wilderness to be by himself. And so my original plan was to cross the state of West Virginia on what they call the Allegheny Trail. It runs from the southern end of the state up to the Mason-Dixon line. I have gradually diminished that very ambitious plan of being on the trail for 300 miles to maybe doing the Standing Stone Trail, which is only 85. But just 2 solid weeks in the woods, just God and me, thinking about where God wants us to go next. What are we being called to do and be at this time in our life as Bower Hill Church? So that's my plan, to do some traveling alone, to do some traveling with my family back to Cameroon, and to do a lot of writing and a whole lot of reading. Stuff that I just can't fit into the weekly routine when there's a sermon to write and people to visit and people to call and committee meetings to attend. This is stuff I will never get to otherwise.
So that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of different kinds of things. Overall, what do you expect to accomplish at the end, during the, what's going to be different at the end of the period versus the beginning?
That's hard to quantify. My hope is that I will come back here with some fresh perspective. You know how sometimes when you're in an issue, you can't see it objectively. When you're in a situation, in a set of circumstances, you can't really see the big picture of what needs to be done. It takes an outsider sometimes to look at your life and say, you don't see this? I think that's true in our family lives, and I think it's true in our church lives sometimes. You need to step back to get an idea of the bigger picture. Not step away, step back. And so my hope is to come back with new vision, with maybe some new purpose, maybe some clarity. Not to say that I lack those things, but I feel like, I don't know if this is appropriate for the interview or not. I feel like I came here as an emergency room doctor, and now I'm a PCP. I feel like I came here with a task that called for a very different set of skills from the ones that I'm called to use now. And so I need some clarity on all of that. I think it's an exciting opportunity. For myself, yes, but also for the church. Now, I do know of a church where the staff was so happy that their pastor went on sabbatical that they didn't want him to come back. I don't think that's going to be the case here. That was here in Pittsburgh, but it wasn't. I hope to come back with new vision and new energy.
So, from a standpoint of expected outcomes, there are personal outcomes, there are professional outcomes, and there are career outcomes. You know, I maybe you could say a word about each of those, particularly as it relates to Bower Hill.
Mm-hmm. Personal outcomes, I think it's obvious that if your pastor is not spiritually healthy, the church will suffer. And I do expect this to add to my own spiritual and perhaps physical and emotional well-being. It has been hard being a pastor these last 2 years. And I don't even know why it's been harder. Everything feels like it's being done underwater. It's just slow and heavy. It's hard to get volunteers. It's hard to get people excited. Though I feel like we're coming out of that quite nicely in this congregation. I feel like we've got good energy here. But I am tired. And I do feel like it will be good for me personally. What was the other one?
Career, in terms of, particularly in terms of Bower Hill, are you going to be ready to cast your net wider when you come back? I think there's some concerns that you're going to go away and have all these great experiences and come back and we're not going to be able to relate to those because we didn't have them.
I see. I don't think that should be a fear. I think, and that's certainly not the intention of a sabbatical. The intention is to retool a pastor to better serve. And if a pastor can't communicate excitement and vision, that is a problem. I don't think it has ever been my problem here. And I don't mean to brag. The spirit has been good, and there's been a good collection of personalities in this congregation. But I think when the congregation has a vision, I have always helped them live into it, and when I have had a vision, they've responded well too. And so that is not the purpose. The purpose is that I would come back and help us together live into the next steps of being Christ's church in this time and this place. But certainly I'm not going to come back and demand that we all, go spend the night in the woods. Because that's not what works for everybody. I understand that. And so for the health of the church, I guess I'm repeating myself at this point. For the health of the church, it's good to have a leader with clear vision. And one who can communicate that vision and get people excited about it and share it, but who can also be sensitive to the vision of the congregation, because this is not the Brian show. It never has been. This is about our collective vision for the future. What we did before isn't necessarily going to work tomorrow. We need to think about some new ways of engaging our community and our members, and reaching the community. I think we have a unique approach to the gospel of Jesus Christ in this church. I think it's very socially responsive. We have a very socially aware congregation who might not be comfortable going door to door, but they do want to respond to the needs of society. And that's how we preach the gospel here. And how we do that tomorrow is what I'm hoping to come back with some ideas about. It's exciting, I think.
Will you be communicating with the congregation during the sabbatical?
So it's recommended that I not communicate with the congregation during the sabbatical, unless, of course, the church burns down or something major happens. So no, unless there's a great emergency. I am to be incommunicado.
Brian, you're going to be gone for several months during your sabbatical, and there are going to need to be things that continue to be items to do at Bower Hill, many of which you manage yourself. In your absence, how would you say that Bower Hill is going to manage things like worship, pastoral care, administration, or emergency contacts?
Okay, let's talk about those one by one. In terms of worship, we do have a company of pastors here to help out. We've been a magnet church for retired pastors and pastors who are affiliated in other ways. And they can always help out. I am planning all the worship services, in fact I have them done already, that will happen in my absence. This will be an opportunity to hear from a variety of preachers who might not always share my perspective. It's said that most preachers have about 5 sermons and they end up saying the same 5 things in all their sermons. And this is an opportunity to hear some of the things outside of the 5 that I unwittingly probably say in all of mine. So in terms of worship, it's an opportunity to expand a little, to hear maybe from some leaders of the groups that we hear about in adult education. Liddy Barlow is an excellent preacher, and she has spoken in adult education. And so in terms of worship, we've got it covered in-house mostly, but it will be a time to maybe invite in some outside speakers as well. And the services are all being planned prior to my departure. So I feel good about the worship. I think we've got a few guest preachers that people really like at this point. And so it'll be a good time to experience worship at Bower Hill Church, a time to branch out and find some other voices. What were the other ones? There was
What
worship.
about pastoral care?
Pastoral care. So my hope for pastoral care is, we have Carl Casey, who has completed his lay pastor training and has done some pastoral care for our church. My hope is that cooperating with him, we can get a group of engaged elders on session, or maybe not on session, but elders in the church who would be good at pastoral care, who don't mind praying with people, who don't mind visiting people, maybe reading to them, to get a little bit of training in the basics of pastoral care and to offer pastoral care in my absence. I think we can do this in-house, and I think it can be an opportunity for elders to live more fully into their callings if they might be called to do pastoral care. We have some people who work in counseling and therapy in the congregation who might, I shouldn't say that because it'll sound like I'm picking on somebody who might be listening, but I have some people in mind that I think would do very well at pastoral care. And this is an opportunity for them to maybe discover a new calling as as a leader in the church, a way that they can minister in this church.
What about administration? We have not a big staff, but we have several people on staff, and we have some staff issues, medical issues with Phil Engel and some things like that. While you're gone, how is administration going to be accomplished for the church?
This church functions very well. There are professional people who have accomplished a lot in life and in business and in managing their own companies, and they bring that skill and that ability to the congregation. We have a very independent staff that functions without micromanagement. We do meet on a weekly basis, but not in the summer. We've never had staff meetings in the summer, at least not on a regular basis. And we have a very capable administration and personnel committee that will be in charge of overseeing the staff in my absence. I have no fears about that. We've always risen to the occasion, and I think in terms of administration, we will once again. Administration, I think, is my weakest skill set anyway. And so you might even see an improvement in the administration of the church in my absence. But I have all faith in members of this church, in especially the administration and personnel committee, to handle anything that might arise. Now, there are going to be some guidelines put in place by session for my absence. There will be no major decisions made in my absence. Committee on Ministry will be choosing a moderator for our session. I'm only going to miss one session meeting. We don't have a July meeting, And I will be back in time for the August meeting, but I will not be at the June meeting. And so Committee on Ministry is going to supply, with maybe some of our input, a moderator for the June meeting. And I expect things to go as always.
What about emergencies, death in the family or medical emergency? Is there going to be a person or a point of contact that might happen, or would that flow back to this group of people you talked about, pastoral care, providing pastoral care?
Yes, that would fall on the elders. When people are asked to be elders, they probably don't know. Maybe it isn't always explained to them that they are the spiritual leaders of the church. I'm an elder, I'm a teaching elder, and I'm expected to preach, but the elders are supposed to be spiritually engaged in the leadership of the church as well. And I think we can do this. I think we have the ability in-house to respond to the spiritual, the pastoral needs of this congregation. And it's an opportunity for us to live into those callings.
A sabbatical growth opportunity for the congregation.
Yes, yes.
I like it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't fear for this congregation. This congregation has always responded well. It has always risen to the occasion when there's been a need, when there's been a mission opportunity. This congregation has always been there. This congregation gets it. It's one of the reasons I love serving this church. And 3 months without me, I don't think you're going to drop the ball. I think it'll actually be fun. I think it'll be energizing. I think it'll be a time of discovery for the church.
Thank you for that. I guess, to kind of close it off, Brian, I would be interested to know how you will be able to tell if the sabbatical was a success.
That's a good question, and I wonder how to answer it. I took 10 days off last summer. They were vacation days. And I crossed the Allegheny National Forest by myself. It's only 98 miles. It's not as ambitious as what I might be looking at this time. But I crossed the whole forest by myself, and I had several people tell me afterward, since you did that, you seem a whole lot happier. Your preaching is so much better. You seem more yourself. And I hope I wasn't not seeming myself prior to that. But I think with things like this, it's hard to quantify the difference. But I think we'll know when we get there. And so I hope it'll be mutually beneficial for the congregation and for me. And I expect it to. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't expect it to be mutually beneficial. This isn't just for me. This is for the long-term health and well-being of the church. I'm excited about our future. I think we have a good future ahead of us. We're poised for health and growth, and we've always had slow growth here, and we've kept going quite well. And I want to think new. I want to think anew. I want to think in new ways about our calling for tomorrow.
Well, I certainly want to thank you for your perspective. I think it's important for us as a congregation to hear what you're expecting and what you're looking forward to, and I'm gratified to see that, it encompasses a journey that we're all going to be on. This interview is going to be on tape and will be available for additional viewing on our website. I would encourage anybody who sees this and has additional questions to get in touch with Brian or to get in touch with me, and we can see about continuing to make sure that everybody understands the particulars of sabbatical and what it means to them personally and to Bower Hill Church as a congregation. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick.